Hello, I'm Sheryl McCarthy of the City University of New York. Welcome to One. Each week, we address issues of timely and timeless concern with newsmakers and the journalists who report on them, with artists, scientists, educators, social scientists, government leaders, politicians. All will be one. Today's guest, a former public school teacher, took on the education establishment as chair of the City Council's Education Committee, and now, having come full circle, she is an educator again. Eva Moskowitz is executive director of the Harlem Success Academy Charter School. I'm so happy you're able to be with us today.
Thanks for having me.
Eva, when you were chair of the City Council Education Committee, you were a pretty fierce critic of the education establishment, whether it was the teachers union or the chancellor. What were your main concerns then?
Well, I held over 100 hearings on every conceivable topic: literacy, math, operational topics. I even held a hearing on toilet paper and the lack thereof in the New York City school system. My concern was that since I grew up in New York City and went through the public school system, we had chancellor after chancellor after chancellor and reform after reform after reform. And at the end of the day, children were not measurably better served. And so I wanted to make sure that whether the reform was coming from the unions or management, that it was going to increase student achievement and fundamentally close the achievement gap in New York City. We have a tremendous issue here in New York City where Black and Latino kids are clearly not getting the education that they deserve and are entitled to. And so I wanted to make sure that there was real, measurable progress.
Now you're heading up an organization that has started one charter school. It is going to start how many more?
Well, the end goal is 40. If I'm still standing after that. But next summer, we're adding another 3 schools, opening up 3 schools next August.
Have you always been a supporter of charter schools?
No, actually, I haven't always been. I didn't really know even what they were 10 years ago. I went through the New York City public school system as a student. I'm the mother of 3 children and a public school parent myself. And education has been my professional passion for quite some time. I got disenchanted with all of the reform ideas, none of which seemed to be really making the fundamental impact. And I began thinking through structurally whether the system could be reformed. And I began to have serious doubts. After over 100 hearings, I had even more serious doubts. And charters seemed to me not a magic bullet, but a very important part of the answer. And so I became a champion because I believe that the combination of freedom and accountability that charters have is going to serve children best.
And charter schools are basically, they are funded in the same way as public schools are, but they are freer from some of the kinds of rules and obligations.
Sure. They are public schools by law, so the notion that they're private schools is totally false and wrong. They're public schools. They unfortunately don't get full funding. They only get 75 cents on the dollar. So we have to do
some fundraising of your own.
Fundraising to make up the difference. But they're free from both the rules of management, the bureaucracy, and they're free from some of the labor rules that
the teacher's contract
and other contracts that impede, I would argue, delivering a high-quality educational service in an efficient manner.
Now, where did your children go to school? What kind of schools did they go to?
Well, they're still little. I've got a 3-year-old, a 4-year-old, and a 9-year-old. My 9-year-old is in a public school on the Lower East Side. I'm a person of middle-class means. I can't afford the high tuition of private schools. So I face the same dilemma that many parents in New York City face, trying to make sure that one's own kid gets a good education. It's obviously a little easier if you're middle class than if you're poor. If you're poor, you're assigned a school and can't necessarily take advantage of all the pilot and magnet programs because it's hard to navigate that system. But even as a middle-class parent, my child doesn't get sports in school. There's not enough art. There's not enough science. I'm subject to many of the same dilemmas that all families in New York are subject to.
Now, I know the teacher's contract was a big issue for you. Tell me something about
it. Was, and I should just say, I come from a family of labor. My grandmother was a U of T delegate. My parents are teachers. My in-laws are teachers. But I came to believe, after studying the New York City school system very carefully and reading the more than 800 pages of the teachers union contract extremely carefully, that the work rules have become an impediment to educating kids, that we need in this day and age a level of flexibility in terms of how to manage the workforce so that children are put first. The way the teachers union contract is oriented, it really puts the grown-ups before the kids. I'm a strong believer in higher salaries for teachers. I believe deeply that the teaching force should be a professional force. It's not, the job of a teacher is not like a factory worker, an assembly line worker. It's closer to a scientist or any other professional, and we should treat teachers as professionals. But we shouldn't have 800 pages of work rules that prevent intelligent, flexible decision-making on the ground. And so I am a critic, and for that, I ended my political career, or at least the teachers union tried to temporarily. I don't die easy, so I plan to come back into politics at some point. But it was a pretty vicious campaign that was waged against me.
You?
Because,
by the union?
Yes, because I stood up for what I believe in. I tried to be extremely fair. Labor was at my hearings. They were free to testify and put their point of view forward. I have supported wage increases for teachers because I think it's the hardest job in the world and insufficiently respected. But that doesn't mean that you should have 800 pages of work rules that are oriented towards the grown-ups and not the kids.
In fact, you supported cutting it down to 15 pages. Wasn't that Joel Klein's suggestion?
Joel Klein had a thin contract proposal, and there were many merits to that proposal. You could go a variety of ways, and reasonable people could differ on what the perfect contract is, but it seems to me that the contract should be limited to wages and benefits, and we shouldn't specify exactly how the job is done. Imagine FedEx if all the rules were enumerated as to exactly what employees could and couldn't do. You couldn't operate. No successful organization in America, or I would argue in the world, is run by 800 pages of rules.
Tell me about Harlem Success Academy. Basically, where you get, how you get your students, how you get your teachers.
Sure. Harlem Success Academy, as I said, is a public charter school located in central Harlem. Our kids get there by lottery, so we have no control whatsoever. We're not elitist. We can't select on any criteria other than we're allowed to have a sibling policy. So if a sibling gets in, we're allowed to accept the sibling.
Are most of them from Central Harlem, or are they from all over?
Most of them are from Central Harlem. We have a vision that elementary school students, you should be able to walk to school and not, have a complicated busing system where people are bused from Far Rockaway to the Bronx. It's sort of a crazy system that we've developed. But the basic idea behind Harlem Success is to provide a rigorous academic education for K-8 students. We have some very unique aspects of our curriculum. We teach science 5 days a week starting in kindergarten. We are passionate.
That's unusual?
That is most unusual. Generally, science isn't taught in the New York City public school systems until 4th grade, and even then it's done once a week. If you look at the achievement gap and you look at what subjects have the widest gap between Black and Latino students and white students, you will find it in the area of science.
Really?
Yes.
I'm surprised. I would have thought it would have been English or writing.
Nope,
no?
It's science. And simultaneously, you have a situation where 8 out of 10 new jobs created in the country and in the state of New York are in the fields of science and technology. Mm-hmm. So we have a practical reason as well as an intellectual reason to provide kids with a great science education. This was one of my passions when I was chair. I held 3-4 hearings on science education, and at Harlem Success, I don't have to ask the department to do it. I can just get it right from the get-go. And our kids in kindergarten have dissected squid. They do experiments every day where they generate a hypothesis. Sometimes their hypotheses when they're 5 are a little wacky, but that's okay. The point is to get kids in the habit of theorizing why something might be true. and then to look at results.
And your teachers, are they refugees from the public school system, or where do they come from?
Many of our teachers come from the public school system. They have been frustrated with the lack of professionalism. We pay our lead teachers approximately $7,000 more than the Department of Education.
Really?
However, our teachers work a longer school day. Our instructional day goes from 7:50 in the morning till 5 o'clock in the afternoon. And our teachers work exceedingly hard in order to close the achievement gap.
Now that you're heading a charter school, how does the reality of the charter school jibe with what you envisioned?
Well, I always had enormous respect for educators, but I didn't know at the level that I know now, just how difficult it is. The behavior challenges that kids come to school with, are very challenging. The facility can impact the school. We are located in a public school building. And so we face all of the challenges.
By yourselves, or are you there with another
school? We're co-located.
School?
We have actually 2 schools that we share a space with. So all the issues of roommates, being a roommate, is challenging. But the facility is a constant challenge. The electricity going off, just the cleanliness of the building and the maintenance of the building. But it's also unbelievably rewarding. I did not expect to see the kind of academic growth that we have seen so quickly. Our kindergartners come in not reading, and by the end of November, they are reading. Our kids come in not being able to write their name, let alone a sentence. And our first graders are writing pages, which is of quite articulate stuff. And so it's unbelievably rewarding to see the results, that if you work hard and you have great teachers and you work as a team, there is no excuse for the achievement gap. And that's exciting.
And and are these predominantly black children or black and Latino?
We only have black children, black and Latino children.
Does they reflect the community?
They reflect the community. Obviously, we're open to children of any race or ethnicity, but we are located in central Harlem, and so we have about 90% African American, about 5% African, and about 5% Latino.
And you have, about close to 300 students right now?
Close to 300.
And how many have did a lot more apply to get in? Or?
Well, we had about 130 spots last year, and we had 500 apply.
Wow.
So there's definitely a need, and I think we really have to revise our notions. I find it very troubling when people say parents, aren't interested in good schools. That is definitely not the case. Our parents are desperate for excellent schools for their kids. They care deeply. Our parents work extremely hard at Harlem Success. They have to read 6 books a week to their children.
Wow.
And they work very hard. There's lots of homework. There's Saturday Academy. It's hard. It's hard work to achieve academic excellence.
We're going to take a break. We'll be back in a moment.
Big dreams and good grades aren't enough to get into college. There are actual steps you need to take. Finding someone who can help is the first and most important. For the next steps, go to knowhowtogo.org.
Welcome back to One to One, and Eva Moskowitz, Executive Director of the Harlem Success Academy Charter School. You talked about feeling hamstrung by the UFT contract. What are some of the things you've been able to do at a charter school that you wouldn't have been able to do at a public school because of that contract?
Sure. Here's one example. The periods by contract in the public school are a certain amount. It's about 50 minutes. We found, for example, that for kids to do art really well, 50 minutes was insufficient because there's setup time, there's cleanup time, and if you really want a kid to work through an art project, you need more time. So
Right.
we made our art period an hour and 15 minutes. You would not be able to do that under the contract.
Okay. There was also the matter of the light bulbs, I understand. Tell us about the light bulbs.
Well, we believe in light at Harlem Success, and the New York City system has a crazy system where the one union changes the ballasts and the other union changes the light bulbs. And when there's no light...
So how many people does it take to change a light bulb?
Too many,
right,
is the answer. And if you go into any New York City school system, you will find rows of lights out. And I obviously find this unacceptable, and so have taken on this issue both as chair of the Education Committee and now as the leader of a school.
What's your relationship with Joel Klein, with Randi Weingarten now? Do they affect your life significantly anymore?
Well, as you may recall, Randi protested the opening of my school last year.
In that particular location, right? Was
yes, although I think it was payback for some other issues that I took on. My hope is that bygones will be bygones, and we can move forward. I have enormous respect for the work that she does. That doesn't mean I agree with her, but I think she's an important leader in this city, and I know she has national aspirations, and I wish her the best of luck. I'm going to be in this arena for a long time to come, and want to work with labor wherever possible. She doesn't always make it so easy to do and personalizes things, but I like to try and keep these debates as professional as possible and so forth. I've gotten into my share of disagreements with Joel and the mayor. I have enormous respect for them, too. For me, this is not a personal issue. This is about asking yourself, when a policy emerges, is it good for kids, or in what way might it not be good for kids, or parents, for that matter? Those are the primary people we're supposed to be serving. So I've been very outspoken, but I have enormous respect for Joel and the mayor. I did endorse the mayor and cross party lines to do so, and I really did so simply on the issue of education. I thought that a mayor who was willing to be judged on this issue, despite the fact that I disagreed with him on some of the particulars, deserved the support of this city, and I still believe that. I think he has made an important contribution. I don't think they've made as much progress as they think they have, and I'm pretty outspoken about speaking up on that front. But Joel has been courageous. He certainly, his heart is in the right place. I think he has been very bold in trying to shake the system up, and I think it needed that. Mm-hmm. That doesn't mean that every single decision he has made is one that I support. I think he wasted a certain amount of time in the first couple of years with this crazy reorg.
Well, the latest controversy is over the grading system, for the schools. Now you're this is just your second year. So, are you subject to grading as well?
Well,
what do you think of that system?
I have offered to be subject to it. I completely and fully support that system. I called for it several years ago. That doesn't mean that the particular algorithm he's using is the one that I would come up with, and I think it's one of these things that's going to get revised as time goes on. And
but you like the concept.
I adore the concept. I think it's fundamental to New York that we recognize what constitutes quality. And people say it's reductionist. Well, grades by their nature are reductionist. I was a college professor. I had to give out a grade. I was a teacher. I had to give out a grade. Does that mean it represents the entire portfolio of a student's work? Of course not. But we have to have some measure of understanding whether a school is adding value or not. And I think it's a very important system. I think cities across the nation should be adopting something similar. We looked at Florida. Florida had a system that's similar to this, and that's how Joel came up with this. Again, it's not perfect, and it has many flaws, and we should debate those flaws. We should come forward and come up with an algorithm that we think is fair and reflects as much as possible high-quality education.
The increased emphasis on testing as a measure of how schools are doing has been very controversial. Are charter schools subject to the same testing requirements, and how do you feel about that?
We are subject to all the state tests, and we actually add tests. We test our kids using tests that are not required because we feel it's instructive. I think good tests are important. If you look at the third grade math, I challenge anyone to say that a kid shouldn't know what's on the third grade math tests. And all this whining about tests, I think, is a little silly. That's not to say when schools drop instruction and become test prep factories, I understand the complaint, but there's nothing wrong with the tests themselves. And again, they're not perfect.
And requiring that students know what's on the test.
Well, yes, this is as
and
old
have
as...
some test-taking skills. Seems
Absolutely.
To be...
I say to our parents, your kids are going to be taking tests for the next 20 years. We hope that they go to law school and med school and they're going to be taking tests.
Right.
They're going to have to take the Bar Association test. They're going to be taking tests. Let's teach them how to ace them, both test sophistication
right.
and the contents. But let's also recognize that we can't become test prep factories. And we have a 9-hour day, and I would challenge anyone to come to our school. There is good instruction going on all the time. But we do have a Testing Tuesday,
right.
where we teach our kids how to ace the test, both in terms of form and in terms of content.
And yet you have so many, I mean, I've heard parents, I've heard politicians act as if, requiring that students have to take these tests and measure up as if it's some kind of child abuse.
Yes. I mean, I don't know where we went wrong in this ideology, but this seems to me silly. We have to have a level of accountability, and tests are part of it. It's not the only part. I mean, when I get my test results from my school, I still go in and observe the teacher.
Right.
I still need to understand qualitatively where is the value added and what does she or he need to do to improve the instruction. So the test is not the whole picture,
right.
but it's an important part of it.
One of the issues for the public schools has been, for years, has been how do you get rid of incompetent teachers who are not so hot, not necessarily teachers who are abusing children sexually, but who are just not so hot.
Sure.
Do you have more freedom as a charter school to deal with that?
Absolutely. We do. We have the ability to hire and to fire. And I know firing is a bad word that no one's supposed to say because it suggests you're a meanie. But the truth of the matter is that not all people are cut out to teach. Teaching is actually a very specialized field that requires very special talents. And I would argue that the standard shouldn't simply be incompetence. That's not how the rest of the world works. They don't simply let people go who are incompetent.
Right.
They let people go who are not great at what they do. And that's the standard at Harlem Success, and that should be the standard in the New York City public school system.
And how do you rate your teachers? How do you decide whether somebody's working out or not, and what's the procedure?
We observe in a constructive manner. First, we select carefully, and we're not subject to all sorts of rules in terms of who we can hire. We had 2,000 applicants for 16 teaching positions.
Really?
So we do a very highly selective process where teachers have to do a demo lesson. We look at their classroom management. We look at their higher order questioning when they come in, and we decide whether this person has the technical know-how as well as the kind of team ethos and the ability to grow as a professional. Once they come to Harlem Success, once teachers come to Harlem Success, our principals are in classrooms all the time. And I mean all the time. Teachers know that they are given the support to improve their craft, but if at the end of the day, after many, many suggestions and many conferences, they cannot improve instruction, we don't keep them. Mm-hmm. And we don't blame the kids. I mean, you can't blame a 5-year-old. If they're not learning, it's the grown-ups' fault.
Right.
And somehow we start blaming children. I understand at middle school level that kids have a responsibility for their
right.
learning, but when they're 5, it's the teacher who's got to make sure they learn. And we can't have, well, these kids can't.
Right.
We don't accept that at Harlem Success.
So you're a year and a half into Harlem Success. How are your kids doing?
Amazingly well. 94% of our first graders are reading at grade level. We do value-added testing. So we test the kids at the beginning of the year and the end of the year to see how much we as an educational organization how much have we added to the kids' education. And this is a very important way of looking at education, because let's say you have an extremely gifted kid who comes in here and you say, oh, well, they're here. Well, they moved an inch. You haven't added much value. You have a kid who's brilliant. So what we do is every kid is tested, and we expect a teacher who has heterogeneous classes. So she may have kids with high IQs, she may have kids with low IQs. We have 23% of our kids are special ed at Harlem Success.
Really? I didn't know that.
Whatever the kids' issues are, challenges, IQ, the needle has to move north, and the teacher is expected to move that needle north. And we have the data to say to the teacher, okay, it's mid-year, it's December. You haven't moved these 6 kids north enough. What are you going to do about it? And what can we do to help you move those kids where they need to be? So the level of accountability at a place like Harlem Success is very, very high.
How many teachers do you have?
We have 15 teachers.
Okay. What do you envisage for the school and for yourself, like 5 years, 10 years from now? One of my interests is cracking the replication nut. If you can do one great school, you've made an enormous contribution to those children's lives. And I have tremendous respect for those educators who just get one school right. It's very hard to do. But in the long run, if we can't bring the charter movement to scale and we can't affect the rest of the system, we will have a limited impact. So my interest in 40 schools is not only to serve the kids within all those 40 school 4 walls, but it's to change the system, to illuminate best practices, and to be engaged in the reform movement. I would like, before I die, to have all the kids in New York City getting a first-rate education. And I particularly am interested in closing the achievement gap. Right.
There is no excuse, and I think Harlem Success is showing it. It doesn't matter what the race, the ethnicity, the socioeconomic background. If you have crackerjack teachers who, and an intelligent school design, the kids can learn. It's not the kids. It's the grown-ups. And until we recognize that it's the grown-ups, we're not going to solve the problem.
Well, I certainly hope you're successful. It's certainly a goal that people have been working at for a long time, certainly as long as I've been covering the New York City schools. I wish we had more time, but we're out of time. So I want to thank Eva Moskowitz for joining me today. For the City University of New York and One to One, I'm Sheryl McCarthy.